1 week season.
Welcome, everybody, to week 8 of Soloship. I'm Squirrel Patrol from 444 Football. I'm joined by JM to Win from 1 week season. So, JM, last night I split the first place prize pool for the the massive single game contest on DraftKings that helps wipe away a memory of a week 7 where I had very little Bo Nix and a lot of Jaden Daniels. How was your week 7?
Different from yours, a little bit disappointing, but for different reasons. I finished 6th in the face mask, which is 555 3 max. But I was trying to decide between my Bo Nix roster in there, my Dak Prescott roster for the game changer, the 1500 single entry. And I chose my Dak roster, which finished out of the money. The Bo Nix roster would have finished first for 100K. So it was my last decision Saturday night. It was like, I was looking at this will change my bankroll exposure on Nix to this. Do I really want that? And so my final decision of the weekend was, no, I will not put this in the game changer. So it was a nice weekend, nice ROI, but could have been obviously dramatically bigger with a first place for 100K. So good weekend. Could have been better, but it's funny. This is like so different from the weeks we've had, because I've been saying this week, like my favorite weeks, and I feel like we've mostly had this year, is where I can just like take my ball knowledge and then just like build better rosters than the field, and it's like I'm playing my favorite plays and I'm building good rosters, and I've had a very nice season so far. Whereas this week I'm like everything's up in the air. I can't predict anything, like that's what this week feels like. And it's just like a straight theory type of slate in a sense.
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting slate. The more I look into it, the more I actually like the slate. Just because last week, we had this massive total with the Washington and Dallas game, so it becomes binary. We've called it the Coors Field slates, right? Where you just have to make the decision. Are going to go with that game or not go with the game. And I went probably overweight on that game, even compared to the field, that ended up being the wrong call. But this week things are pretty wide open. We have a range of game totals, and we have some outsized spreads. So we have, the Colts are 14.5-point favorites. I think 7 out of the 10 teams are favored by 6. The favorite is favored by 6 or more points. So it creates some big implied point totals. But, for DFS, we like our stacking, right? We like the correlation. We like the idea that if there's an underdog, like that underdog is maybe outperforming, so it pushes the favorite, or a high-powered offense to keep their foot on the gas throughout the entire game. And I think that's like a dynamic you have to be thinking about in almost every kind of game environment or stack you're thinking about this week. I guess which of those teams or game environments sticks out to you in terms of this week?
Yeah, I think I don't see how the Ravens have a bad offensive performance here. And I think that's I feel the same way about the Colts. I feel the same way about the Falcons, but I think there's a lot more question marks on what that means for fantasy on those teams. I think there's a lot of question marks on how you play the Ravens and how those points shake out, but a high level of certainty that we get tournament winning scores from them, if that makes sense. Like the Colts haven't produced any tournament winning scores all season. Tyler Warren hasn't cracked 20 points. Outside of Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman hasn't cracked 21 points. Daniel Jones has the one game in week 1, right, where he had a couple rushing touchdowns, and so it's they're going to do well, but what does that mean for us, right? And the Falcons, we know they're going to run it. You and I were talking before the show, but is Algier going to get a bunch of the work, and maybe Bijan puts up 25, which is great, but not at his price tag. Whereas the Ravens, somebody is putting up a really strong score here, is how I feel. And so on a slate full of uncertainty, I feel like the highest certainty is we're certain the Bengals are going to throw. What does that mean? We don't know for sure. We're certain the Falcons and Colts will do well on offense, but what does that mean for our DFS rosters? We don't know for sure. I feel pretty confident that the Ravens are going to do well on offense, and that will mean something for DFS. And so that's sort of my starting point on my end.
You hit on the 3 teams in order that I wanted to talk about
nice.
First.
There we go.
Starting with the Ravens, I'm always a Lamar Jackson fan. I think some of it comes from having a little bit of a FanDuel lean. The running quarterbacks generally do better. The touchdowns count more relative if there's only a half point per reception. Yeah. And you usually have more money to spend on FanDuel, and the prices don't go down as low. So sometimes you'll get a 4K quarterback on DraftKings like Dylan Gabriel, and he seems very tempting. But on FanDuel, you really just don't need to go there. So quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson are much easier to spend up on. But this week, I liked Lamar Jackson. He might be my number 1 quarterback. but against Derrick Henry, that sticks out to me on DraftKings as being like preposterously cheap. He's $6K. I keep writing up, blurbs for running backs that are more expensive than Derrick Henry and saying they're good value plays. Oh my God, Derrick Henry's like cheaper than this guy.
Yeah.
So they're facing a Bears offense or Bears defense rather. I think gives up the second most rushing yards per carry. I don't know. I always love the Lamar Jackson to Zay Flowers connection. I guess do you want to dive into the Ravens pieces and how you see that game in particular?
Yeah, what I do want to note, because Flowers has so little usage in the red zone, in the end zone. So Lamar's gone for 26 plus in half his games since the start of last year, 20 games total. Zay Flowers has gone for 22 or more in 2 of those. And I think it's 15 or less in the other 8. So I think that because Zay Flowers is popping as the second highest owned player on the slate, because people are going to gravitate toward Lamar, I think that's going to be a really popular stack. And it has almost never hit in the context of Lamar hitting. So I think that's worth shouting out. I think that there's actually more plus EV ways to play Lamar and people won't be on them. So I like that as far as edge this week. And then, the Derrick Henry one, I don't know if I'll quite go this far, but I could, obviously I'll have some Lamar plus Henry, but also I could see literally every roster I have without Lamar has Derrick Henry, because if I'm betting that Lamar doesn't have, 26, 27 plus points, and don't I think that Derrick Henry's putting up the points on this particular stage? Is kind of how I'm looking at it, because I think the Ravens will do well. I think it's one of the highest confidence bets to make is directionally Ravens score points, and then how do those points shake out is sort of the next decision to make.
That actually brings up a really interesting thought, because I almost always whenever I'm getting a lot of Ravens in my lineups, I almost always set a rule that says no Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry on the same lineup, because Derrick Henry doesn't catch a lot of passes, and they're usually both too expensive. You want the one that's getting the rushing touchdowns, but because they're both usually very expensive. But this week they're actually not that expensive, so you can actually compare them on the same roster and just bet on the team doing well. And you don't necessarily need 2 rushing touchdowns from Derrick Henry or 2 from Lamar Jackson for that to be the optimal or winning lineup. It's interesting. You're a little bit down on Zay Flowers. There are some peripheral Ravens receivers I think you can go to. You can go to the tight end. There's very little opportunity cost at tight end this week. So you could go to a Mark Andrews or even an Isaiah Likely. Do you have any interest in the peripheral Ravens wide receivers? I guess.
Well. Most of Lamar's big games are these 4 and 5 passing touchdown games. Where he has 225 passing yards, but he just keeps flipping passing touchdowns. And then the guys he uses in that range are Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews most frequently. So this is pretty crazy. You ready for this? Since the start of last year, literally in 25% of Ravens games, Lamar plus Rashad Bateman plus Mark Andrews, 25% of their games would have kept you on a 200 to 240 point pace. 15% of the games, Lamar plus Rashad Bateman plus Mark Andrews would have kept you on a 240 point pace at this week's salaries. And so the hard thing about that is because you're just relying on Bateman and Andrews catching the touchdowns, when they miss hard, right? But so it's kind of sucks when you build a roster. You're if I don't get the touchdowns, I'm not finishing in the money. But also, we're not playing to finish in the money. We're playing to get first place. And that literally 25% of the time since the start of last year, it's just play these 3 together, and it keeps you on a 200 point pace. And again, 15% of the time, 240 point pace. So yeah, I think that betting on Lamar with the guys who can score the touchdowns is a really interesting way to go. And the Lamar stacks that have worked out have been all over the place, right? It's been Lamar plus Henry plus Flowers, Lamar plus Henry plus Bateman plus Andrews, Lamar plus Henry plus Andrews, Lamar plus Bateman plus Andrews, Lamar plus Likely plus somebody else, all different ways that it sort of works out. But I think that just the idea of doing something differently than just the straight Lamar plus Flowers is a sharp way to go. The 2 times that Flowers hit with Lamar, you wanted to play other guys as well. So one time it was Henry and Flowers, and one time it was, I think it was an onslaught. It was Flowers and Bateman and Likely all hit with Lamar. And so I think just the straight 2-player stack is pretty negative EV if we look at likely ownership on that player combination and how things have played out over the last year plus. So I do think there's some edge in just playing Lamar, but playing him a little bit differently than everybody else will play him.
So we also have the Colts actually have the highest implied point total of the week, but obviously some concerns because they're 14.5 point favorites. So the question is, can the Titans keep pace? And I remember, was it 3 weeks ago, the Justin Fields week, I was much higher on Daniel Jones than Justin Fields, and it looked so great for 3 quarters until Daniel Jones did not come out in the 4th. And Justin Fields went berserk in the fourth quarter. Do you think you'll be going to some Colts? Do you think Jonathan Taylor has the potential to put up a big enough game to pay off his price tag? Or do you have any interest in the Colts passing game?
I don't have interest in the Colts passing game. I do have interest in Jonathan Taylor because he can get the 3 touchdowns, to the 160 rushing yards. So yeah, that's how I'm looking at this team. It was weird last week. Like the Tennessee offense looked good for one quarter, and they had like a bunch of motion and a bunch of easy buttons they were pushing, and then it was like they only had enough ideas for one quarter. So I'm like, I do wonder if maybe this offense, like with extra time, if Mike McCoy's gonna have more stuff and this offense starts looking better. But I don't think I want to bet on that till I see it, and that's gonna be required for them to keep pace with the Colts. So yeah, I do think, to me, it's just Jonathan Taylor on the Colts is all I'm focused on.
I'll say it's tough to decide amongst the 3 expensive running backs this week. He's got Jonathan Taylor is the most expensive, and he's obviously in a good spot. You've got Bijan Robinson. He's going up against the Dolphins, defense. That's the team I wanted to talk about next. And then you've got Christian McCaffrey, who's got like 6 receptions in all every game this season, at least 6 receptions. Among the 3, I have actually a strong preference for Jonathan Taylor.
Same.
Looking earlier, he was minus 450 to score a touchdown, like his anytime touchdown odds, and it was plus crazy. 125 to score 2 touchdowns.
Wow.
And he's a guy that like catches passes as well, and he's he puts up yardage, so it's not like he's getting these shorts, always getting these like short touchdowns. I'll say I think I'm a little bit more interested in Daniel Jones than it sounds like you are, just because it is possible the Titans keep it close, or whatever happens, right? Like Daniel Jones gets rushing touchdowns as well sometimes. Like they'll call his name in the in goal line situations as well as Jonathan Taylor. So I think I'll be going to, it sounds like, more Daniel Jones than you will. And I also think it's possible to like pair Jones and Jonathan Taylor, or pair Daniel Jones and Tyler Warren is like kind of a lower risk stack, because if Daniel Jones just does well and Tyler Warren puts up like eight receptions, like they're not that expensive. I think Daniel Jones is like the 8th most expensive quarterback on DraftKings, and I think similar price on FanDuel. That's like a pretty good discount on the quarterback of the team with the highest implied point total.
Yeah. I mean, I've played around with the idea of like for single entry 3 max, just being like, I'm just throwing Lamar on 100% of my rosters or 80% of my rosters, just because I don't see a lot to love elsewhere. And it's like, yeah, Daniel Jones could, Lamar could, like more, and so like it's harder for me to pull away, but I don't mind that angle. Would you play a Titans? I mean, the Titans threw 32 passes last week, and like nobody had more than 5 targets, so I don't think you have to play a Titans pass catcher. But would you play a Titans pass catcher on a Daniel Jones roster?
I probably would, because they're all going to be super cheap. I think they released Tyler Lockett, so I think they've got like DK is the slot receiver. I think he's like 3,300. I don't know Iomanor's exact price tag, but I'm assuming
39. Yeah,
39. Yeah, 4K-ish or less. I could see myself using a cheap Titans receiver with Daniel Jones, trying to get different, because I don't think either of those guys is going to see a lot of ownership.
Yeah.
But if one of them does get a long touchdown, then maybe that's keeping Daniel Jones in there in the fourth quarter. I probably wouldn't go to the running backs.
Yeah. Cool.
But yeah, let's we'll move on to, I guess, the third team I wanted to talk about, is Atlanta, because they're facing the Dolphins defense. That's been a defense we want to pick on all season. Atlanta's playing at home, so obviously it's like a perfect setup for Bijan Robinson, but is it too perfect? Because Tyler Algier is there as well. He's better than your average like backup running back. Somewhat of like a 1A, 1B situation. And then with no Ray McLeod, I guess you do have Drake London there. You have Kyle Pitts, Michael Penix. Michael Penix is listed as questionable, but I believe likely to play. What are your thoughts on the Falcons? Is it Bijan a bust for you, or do you have any interest in the passing game?
The first thing I saw this week was that in 3 of their last 7 games, now I forget the numbers, it was early in the week, but like in 3 of their last 7 games, Bijan plus Drake London have combined for like outrageous scores. And then I realized, like, okay, well, Darnell Mooney missed all 3 of those games, 1, and 2, like this passing attack has looked so bad, and the Dolphins have looked so bad on offense, and the Falcons are so biased toward the run, and teams biased toward the run so heavily against Miami that is like, and I started thinking about that because they were early week optimized. We're just like throwing Michael Penix double stacks out there like crazy. And then I started looking at like Bijan plus Drake London. I was like, that's pretty interesting. And I started looking at the Michael Penix stuff, and I was like, they're not going to throw, like they don't want to throw more than 26 times if they don't have to here. So yeah, I think to me, I could see building like a Penix stack, but then I'd want to bring back like Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane or something like that, like bet on this being a high scoring game, which is viable. I think it's possible. Or it's just the running backs to me. And then, like you said, it's a question of my rankings for the running backs go Jonathan Taylor, then Bijan, and then CMC. Because to me, it's like there's risk that Bijan has a smooth, easy 24, 26 DraftKings points, but then it's like, all right, now Tyler Algier is mixing in and we don't get the full run out that we need here. So yeah, I think there's definite risk there for sure.
Yeah, actually, and I'll comment on CMC. So on FanDuel, the pricing is reversed, and I think you get a big discount on Christian McCaffrey on FanDuel relative to Bijan Robinson. I think he's about $900 cheaper. So I was surprised when I was getting more Christian McCaffrey on FanDuel. So I think Christian McCaffrey is viable on FanDuel. On DraftKings, I'd much rather have Bijan Robinson if Bijan's cheaper. What you need from McCaffrey at his price is generally touchdowns, which he got last game and put up a 42-point, DraftKings score. But Houston, at least as of last week, I think was allowing the fewest points in the league. So like it's not setting up as a great matchup. And he does, like he just piles on those receptions, but he needs a lot of them. Now you've got Kittle back. So I'm not sure, like if he gets like 7 receptions, 70 yards, if he's not getting the touchdowns, which are not easy against the Texans defense, then I'm not sure he's paying off that price tag on DraftKings.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I haven't built any Christian McCaffrey rosters this week because he can go for 40. It just seems pretty low probability against the Texans. And so it feels like we're paying for the floor more than for the ceiling. If I lose because of that, I'm okay with that.
So one thing we haven't touched on yet, and I actually think this is interesting, is that the highest total game of the week is actually Dallas and Denver. And Denver, is just coming off that week 7 where Bo Nix put up almost 40 points. It was the highest scoring fantasy player at all positions on the week. Do you have any interest in that game? Because the total is the highest. It's the only game, I think, with a total above 50 points. And the spread is pretty close. I think it's about 4 points, 3.5. Yeah, 3.5 points. So I think Vegas is giving more like respect to the Dallas offense than I would have expected playing in Denver. Do you have any interest in that game as a potential game stack?
I mean, yes and no. Like it's kind of like the Caleb Williams thing was for me last week, where I like up until Thursday night, it was like, yeah, I'm probably going here, and then it was like, I'm not. Like, and I guess I don't know, it's a little bit feel where it's just like it's not clicking for me, but also I got the Bo Nix score last week. You know what I mean? And it was like the Bo Nix, like the Denver offense has been so bad, not because teams stopped them, but because they miss so many throws. Bo Nix misses so many throws. He misreads so many things. They make so many mistakes. So then you're like, hey, I actually think the Cowboys defense is improving. Probably like not a popular take quite yet, but like their personnel, they shouldn't be horrible, right? They should be middling. And then Matt Eberflus is just going to run this zone defense where it's like, keep everything in front of you. So the fact they've been hit for so many big plays is kind of crazy, right? And so then if you're forcing a team to march the field, and then if you get an offense in the Broncos that's been really inconsistent, like by their own accord, I think we could see a game where the Broncos are just having a hard time putting together drives. And I've been saying I think the Cowboys are like the Bengals, from last year, where it's just like their offense is so good. And then their defense has a higher floor than last year's Bengals, but it's bad. And so you just get these shootouts. But I think the Cowboys are going to be in the mix to like for the playoffs. Like they're going to be a scary team all season long. So I think this is like they can score points here, but not up to their usual level because they're playing Denver. I think that they're going to give up points, but it's not going to be enough for like the explosive stuff. But I say all that just to say that's how I'm kind of attacking my rosters. I'm not trying to argue anybody off of like the Broncos offense against any offense off against the Cowboys defense is, I guess how I'm trying to put that is like, so for me, I'm not going here this week. At least I don't plan to, but I also am not like taking a strong stance to tell people don't play against the Cowboys defense because very clearly the Broncos could pop in this one.
Yeah, I think this is a game I'm more interested, it sounds like, than you are. Although, I guess with 80% Lamar Jackson, like, I'm going to be more interested in anything, other than Lamar Jackson than you are. But I think with like 5 to 8, like say 5 to 8 rosters or 5 to 8 single entry rosters, that I would stack up Bo Nix. He's not going to get 40 points again. He needs like 2 rushing touchdowns probably to hit that score, and he's unlikely to do that again. But I think the Dallas defense on the road, even if it's improving, it's been one of the worst defenses so far, this season. So I think I would make a priority to get like Cortland Sutton on that roster, because I think Mims and Troy Franklin are going to pop off the page as like value plays. So I think they're going to see some ownership, and people are not going to play Cortland Sutton. So I like the idea of Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton, and then you're picking one of the Dallas wide receivers probably. Hopefully the one that Patrick Surtain's not covering, which could be either CeeDee Lamb or George Pickens, depending on your how much salary you have. But I think that's a way that game opens up, and it just wouldn't shock me if the highest total game with a close spread ends up being the game that you wanted to stack.
100%, yeah.
If it's not seeing high ownership, I think it's worthy of being a significant greater than 10% portion of my rosters for single entry.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% on board with it. I mean, we're now at 9 out of 17 games that Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton have combined for around 40 or more points. Most of those games have been 45 or more points. And so, it's like half the games, right? Half the games since the start of last year, Lamar Jackson's hit for like the score that we're going to want this week. Half the games since last year, Bo Nix and Sutton have, since like Bo Nix had his feet under him, half the games Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton have hit for roughly the score you're going to want. So yeah, I can totally see going there this week. I'm just sort of, I guess, I'm simplifying things in my approach by saying, where do I have the most confidence? And like, where do I see the fewest things that can go wrong? It's like the Ravens offense doing well, but also like I could step back and say, well, the math, because with Lamar, you don't know who he's going to hit with. Well, with Bo Nix plus Sutton, like that's a 2-player pairing that's kind of hit at the same rate. So yeah, I mean, I'm like I said, I don't think I'm going there, but it's more a function of how I'm seeing this week and less like, certainly I would not try to tell anybody to not go there this week. It's just like how I'm building my rosters.
So there's one game we haven't touched on that I think has a high-ish total, and I think there's some interesting players on both sides, and that is Tampa Bay and New Orleans. So we still have Rachaad White at 6,400, again getting the overwhelming majority of the work for Tampa Bay in relief of Bucky Irving. He's out with an injury. On the Saints side, both Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave are showing up as good values, as they often do. Do you have any thoughts on that game? I'll say that I think like Rachaad White is going to end up as one of my higher owned running backs again, just because of the workload, the projection. He's only 6,400. I think I like Derrick Henry more, but I think Rachaad White still gets in there for me at 6,400. And then you can run a Saints wide receiver opposite that if you want. Do you have any interest in that game and thoughts on Rachaad White and the Saints wide receivers?
Yeah, I mean, Rachaad White played, I think it was 63 out of 69 snaps last week. So apparently they just don't like Sean Tucker at all. But yeah, like I always question the ceiling on Rachaad White. I kind of sketched out like rushing yards plus receiving, plus receptions, plus receiving yards, like pencil him in for like around 15 points before touchdowns. And then, do you think he gets a touchdown? Do you think he gets 2 touchdowns? So that's kind of like the 15 to 27 point range. And obviously he could finish above that in the yards and catches, but that sort of would be my range of expectations for him. And then, yeah, like I think people are going to go to Ibuka, which this offense hasn't like treated him like they treated Chris Godwin last year, right? They haven't been like, let's build the offense around him. It's been more like, let's keep him as part of the flow of the offense. So I don't think I'm quite going to get there at 7K. I do think I think that this game's interesting. It's a close spread. Vegas is putting respect on the Saints, which I've kind of been doing throughout the season, especially in New Orleans, where, they're implied to score 3 touchdowns in this spot. So I think they could keep things close. And I think that there's like in my notes, it was like mix and match around my core stuff, mix and match some Saints wideouts and some Bucks pieces was kind of like how I'm looking at things. Was bets on like primary bets on the Ravens and Bears, secondary bets on, the Bengals passing, the Eagles potentially scoring some points, deep down bets on maybe some CJ Stroud stacks and some Spencer Rattler stacks. And then like the mix and match being like Carolina, Buccaneers, and Saints pieces. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. It's not popping to me, but nothing really is this week. And so I think when you go down to like, what can we feel good about potentially bringing in the points, that certainly fits for me.
So one more situation we should probably touch on is AJ Brown did not practice this week.
Yeah.
And I think there was a quote that, he can still play, he's a player that can still play even if he doesn't practice throughout the week. But if AJ Brown misses the game, then that's going to probably give a big boost to Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert as well. Makes Jalen Hurts actually a little bit easier to stack. And it's also the same matchup from 2 weeks ago that we call it a revenge matchup again for Saquon Barkley facing the Giants. Any thoughts on that game, Philadelphia and the Giants? And I guess, do you have any insight on whether or not you think AJ Brown will play and, what the repercussions would be if he does not?
Yeah, he seems to be implying that he is going to play, but kind of feels like a long shot, right? I don't know. Kind of feels like we're going to have to wait till Sunday to know, and that might be the case in a few spots this week. I think this sort of feels like the week where, again, just feels like the week where Barkley's finally going to break out because it has to happen at some point, he doesn't look like he's lost a step. The line's not blocking as well, but they're not awful. They're playing the Giants. And if he doesn't hit, I would think that one of the pass catchers hits is how I'm looking at this spot. So I think Eagles are very live this week. And if AJ Brown's out, that really condenses things to where there's a higher level of confidence in Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. So yeah, I'm going to mix and match these Eagles pieces this week. And I don't really have a strong preference for any one piece over another. But if AJ Brown's out, that certainly boosts my confidence in Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, I believe the Eagles have a bye next week, and that could be something that plays a factor. If it's close for AJ Brown, they might just say, "Well, why don't you sit?" I believe they're still touchdown or more favorites, so that could play into the decision as well. I think it's a classic situation. It's actually one of the things I was thinking about just right before we did the show is that when you take away when you have a team that has multiple good receiving options, a good receiving tight end. And then one of the receiving options goes away. I'm not going to play Jahan Dotson. It makes Jalen Hurts so much easier to stack. if he's losing his, star wide receiver or one of his star wide receivers, but it actually makes your chances of hitting on a Jalen Hurts stack so much better because you just know, I'm going to put Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. And you don't necessarily have to worry about the peripheral wide receivers.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And Hurts is definitely in the mix for me is if I'm on rosters where I'm not going to Lamar, where am I going? Hurts is kind of near the top of that list of viable options there. And like you said, it makes the stacking easier without AJ Brown. We just might have to wait to have answers on how that's going to look.
It does feel like we'll find out on Sunday.
Yeah.
I guess they probably are not going to travel till Sunday because it's Philadelphia and New York. So yeah,
aren't they playing? They're playing at home too, aren't they? Yeah, they're playing in Philadelphia even. So,
okay, yeah. So we're not going to get a travel report on AJ Brown. I guess wanted to touch on because we have Cincinnati playing the Jets, and those have been two bad defenses. Everybody on the Jets is questionable, so there's not necessarily a lot we talk about. I think Breece Hall is going to project for ownership. I'm not sure who's going to really see it. I think he's questionable, so if he misses the game, I do think Isaiah Davis will be in play.
Yeah.
So that's something to consider if we see Breece Hall declared out or something like that. But actually, I wanted to ask about the other side of the game more, the Bengals. Do you have any interest in Joe Flacco? I think Joe Flacco is going to probably make his way maybe into one of my 6 to 8 single entry rosters, and pair him with Jamar Chase. Do you have any interest in going there?
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I think, like I said, where do we have the highest confidence? It's Ravens scoring points, probably Eagles scoring points, Colts scoring points, Falcons scoring points, Bengals passing the ball, right? So how effective will it be? The Jets defense they've been playing way better, but they're going to be missing Sauce Gardner. So that hurts a lot. And, we're it's a lot to put faith in Flacco, but all he's doing is just throwing the ball quickly, to elite guys and then letting them do the work. And so, yeah, Flacco is definitely up there at the very top of the mix for me of other quarterbacks to be thinking about on this slate. And I think Jamar Chase one-offs, Jamar Chase paired with Flacco are both really intriguing ways to go on this one.
So I think we touched on all the major games. I guess maybe one Buffalo and Carolina. Andy Dalton starting for the Panthers, 7.5 point spread. I think James Cook will be in play. I think Josh Allen maybe for larger field. Any interest in going there?
We know Josh Allen. We need the opponent to push the game. I do think the Panthers could push things here, but this game has such a broad range of outcomes because the Panthers are also a really good run team, and the Bills we know are not good at stopping the run. But if the Bills sell out to stop the run, then you force, okay, let's force Andy Dalton to beat us. Can Andy Dalton do that? So it could be like the Panthers do well, but the game gets slowed down because they're running the ball. It could be that they do well passing and the scoring kind of takes off. It could be that they put it in Andy Dalton's hands and he does poorly and the Bills just sort of control this game. And then on top of that, like the Panthers have a legit good run defense and a pretty good pass defense at this point too. All they don't have is a pass rush, but that doesn't like the pass defense doesn't concern me for Josh Allen. It's more like, do they ask him to win this game? I think that for me, it's like large field, but it's like there's a story where the Panthers do really well on offense, and this is like a 31-24 game, and Josh Allen is unleashed and nobody's really on him. But I'm not going there in single entry this week.
Yeah, it's the like prototypical thing. I'm gonna have some Josh Allen and Ted McMillan rosters. Yeah,
yep.
Probably with like Shakir, Keon Coleman.
Yeah, because you have to have a Panthers piece on it too, because you got to tell the story of it like being a high scoring game. Because otherwise you're not going to say like, oh yeah, go put up a bunch of stats, Josh Allen, and like a blowout win. It's just not how they function. But if this can be high scoring, he's there for the taking this week.
Yeah, it'll be in my large field 150 sets, so I remain engaged even if Josh Allen puts up 35 points. I'm still well, maybe my Josh Allen rosters,
yeah.
But yeah, it's probably not somewhere I'm going to go for single entry. That about does it for the week. Any closing thoughts?
It's a weird week. I'll leave it with that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fun week because there isn't a clear place to go. There's kind of risk everywhere, and I think that makes it much more interesting for our DFS contest.
Yeah, for our content, for our contest, and yeah, like I said, it's not the weeks that give me my highest ROI over time, but I know that like the typical DFS player, like sharp DFS player, this is a bonanza type week because you just lean into theory a little bit more and kind of let the chips fall. So yeah, it should be a fun one this week.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll see everybody at the top of the leaderboards. That'll do it for this week, and we'll catch you guys next week.